Oh god, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Between Buckets podcast, episode 2. My name is Patrick Cross, and I'm the sole inhabitant of the no one could beat the 2014-15 San Antonio Spurs Island. And joining me today, as usual, is Lucas Pearce.
My goodness, Patrick, it's good to be back.
You excited, big fella?
Unbelievably.
Today, we're going to be looking at some of our award predictions, all the big awards, the usual ones. We're going to be looking at some dark horses that we have, because for once, I think we might agree on a couple of them. Isn't that wild?
That's one for the records.
That'd be something. Don't get used to it, Between Buckets fans. We're also going to look at some of our own awards that we've made up. And finally, we're actually going to be looking at an article of mine, looking at the viability of big men in the contemporary NBA basketball landscape. But before we do all that, we're going to hear from a quick plug. If, like Lucas and myself, you enjoy a side dish of written analysis to go with the main meal, which is this podcast, then you should head to betweenbuckets.com. On the site, you'll find feature articles looking at topics such as Giannis's MVP defense, a critical year for Ben Simmons, and our top 25 player rankings heading into the 2019-20 season. Be sure to check it out, as there are some contentious names challenging conventional wisdom and some familiar faces in declining places. Also, be sure to follow Between Buckets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more updates and analysis. Back to the pod. Alrighty, Lucas, we're going to start it off with a big one. It's Boban Marjanovic level big. I want your MVP prediction.
So I feel like when you factor in all of the parity that has now infiltrated the league, and you look at which players are on which teams, I think it's Giannis's to lose, and I think that's by a significant margin. Sure, we could justify it with other candidates, but when I went through it and I tried to figure out who could rival Giannis, there are so many ifs and buts. He has the most stable case.
Yeah, it's definitely, with the player transaction that we've seen in the last offseason, I think, particularly looking over at the Western Conference, if you look at his biggest rival from last season, James Harden, he's picked up Russell Westbrook as a teammate. And although I don't think that's going to hinder Harden's individual output that much, as I plan on bringing up a little bit later in the podcast, I do think it'll be enough in voters' minds at least to knock Harden back down a peg. And as for most of last season, we know it was a two-horse race for all of it. Paul George was in there quietly for a little bit, but his injury kind of derailed that. And I think once you take out Harden as Giannis's biggest opposition from last year, I don't think there's a majorly compelling case enough for anyone else to justify taking Giannis down as the favourite.
I agree. I think Mike D'Antoni's too good of a coach to not implement Westbrook in a way that I think may even change up some of Harden's usage rate and results. I wouldn't be surprised if his scoring numbers are down, much like his facilitating, because the nature of their team is no longer reliant on the three, and that's primarily because Westbrook just can't shoot them. I think the pace and the facilitation of this team and their offense is definitely going to change, and I totally agree with you.
In terms of Giannis, though, a lot have been said on this podcast as well about how we think Milwaukee may have been taking a step back, especially with looking at the loss of Malcolm Brogdon. Do you think something like that is enough to have a knock against Giannis in his argument?
No way. I think it does the opposite. I think once you consider the extra shots that are available, and I think once you consider a team that has already established a precedent of leaning on Giannis, it actually increases his case, I would argue. The only knock, and we've talked about this in our last podcast, the only knock is on the defensive end, and I think that even increases it, because Giannis is a freak defender as well. He can play two sides of the court. So really, I only see upwards in terms of him becoming, or cementing, rather, his MVP candidacy as the favourite.
Yeah, in looking at this one, I was a little bit worried about what Philadelphia might do as I'm predicting, a really successful regular season team, and maybe knocking Milwaukee and subsequently Giannis down a peg. But ultimately, I've gone with Giannis as well, just pretty much for the reasons that you've said. I think the field has gotten more narrow. I was tempted to do a cheeky pick, someone like Jokic, because I thought Denver could be a really good team out west, and he might get bonus points for perhaps leading his team through that bloodbath of the conference. But ultimately, I can't go past Giannis either. But
there's too much uncertainty in the West.
There really is. That's why I think it was too difficult to predict something there. But with that being said, I have put my dark horse down, though. I've gone with Joel Embiid. Just because I think there is a clear narrative that might build that we could see around Embiid, which could propel him past Giannis. So if we take the West to a side for a second, we're saying that players are going to cancel each other out. It's going to be too difficult to stand out. If we're just looking at the East, I think if Joel Embiid can put it all together, the flashes that we've seen, if we can get his health right, if we can get his body right, which is reportedly lost 11 kilos, I think we could see Philadelphia, if they were to, say, become the number one seed in the East, take down Milwaukee. If they win 4 or 5 more games than the Bucks, perhaps an argument might build around someone like Embiid as an MVP.
I think that he has the caliber to be an MVP. My only issue with Embiid winning it this year is I don't know if he can have the same stats. I also am uncertain as to his health. Sure, it's great that it's great that he's lost 11 kilos, and it's great that the team has changed some of its dynamics, and offensively he will be that go-to option, and obviously defensively his presence is already known. I think all of those are there. I just think Giannis has the better situation.
Ultimately, I agree, but I just think there's a plausible world in which Embiid can carry and be the face of this franchise as he already is, and that the Philadelphia take a huge leap. Ultimately, I'm going with Giannis, but I don't mind a little dark horse chance on.
Yeah,
Embiid.
no, I agree. I think on a planet not too distant from our own, it's a great dark horse candidacy.
Have you got a dark horse of your own?
I do indeed, and mine is a little bit of a cheat. I'm going with Kawhi Leonard.
Classic Lucas Pearce right here.
And I'm going with the claw predominantly because I think the only thing stopping him from really being eligible is his load management. And we've heard in the media that his load management this year will not resemble the same amount of games missed as last year. And look, I'm not putting much credence in that report. I think Kawhi has proven he will do what he wants to do when the time comes. But once you strip away health, what else is stopping him, really? I think in terms of depth, in terms of even, we both agree, having the best player on the team and leading them to that 1 seed, if that happened in the Western Conference, if he could manage to do that, he would be putting up wonderful statistics. And I think really he's got the narrative on his side in that he's never won the award before. But beyond that, he would clearly have had to be healthy. And he's also leading the Clippers into a height that they haven't really experienced since Lob City days with Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan.
Hopefully they'll be disappointed if they don't eclipse those Lob City
era.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, just with Kawhi, I think he's the best player in the NBA, so there's automatically an argument there for him to be MVP. But my one knock on his MVP chances, which isn't exactly scientific, is that I'm not sure if he has that drive to get it. I'm not sure. He's been a 2-time champion, 2-time finals MVP. He's chasing down being the first guy in NBA history to be a finals MVP and champion on 3 different teams. I'm not sure if MVP is really something that's in his scope. So that would kind of be my knock on his case.
And I agree. I don't think Kawhi's given us any suggestion that he cares about the award. In fact, I think when he finished second, I don't even remember a response from him, to be honest. But with Kawhi, I think my argument rests on the fact that if he plays 70 plus games, he's got a huge candidacy there, because think about what a healthy Kawhi Leonard does for a team, particularly one that is as deep as the Clippers.
Exactly right, and he's definitely got that automatic case of even potentially being the best player on the best team, which you've always got yourself in the conversation in that sense. Alrighty, in terms of MVP, Lucas and I are both going Giannis. He's got the dark horse Kawhi, I've got dark horse Embiid. Lucas, can I guess your Rookie of the Year prediction?
Look, if you must, Patrick, let's make it interesting. Go ahead.
Is it, say, the 115-odd kilo athletic, never-before-seen freak in New Orleans?
I had him at 125, man.
He looks about 135.
Oh, my goodness.
And those knees are probably feeling it, aren't they?
Oh, we need another pod to talk about that. But anyway, yes, you are unbelievably right in that I think Zion Williamson is my favourite for Rookie of the Year.
What's the case?
Opportunity. As we know, it's a new team. It's a young team. It's been made very clear, despite their GM David Griffiths' remarks that this is Drew Holiday's team. It is Zion. This city is revolving around him. He is going to be this new foundation for which their basketball culture is built on. He looked phenomenal in the preseason on a physical level. He's already got all the media under his thumb, as I've already alluded to. I think he'll put up numbers. I think that if they have any success, and that's not necessarily a playoff berth, but even if they could get a 10th seed, a 9th seed, if they could keep it interesting that last leg of the regular season, I think the award's his. All he has to do is perform in the same stratosphere as what he's already showcased that he can be capable of doing and remain healthy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's an absolute lock. I think the only scenario where he doesn't win it, quite frankly, is just the health. We've already seen him go down in the preseason with an injury. He's expected to miss the first couple of weeks of the season, whatever that will turn out to be. But
the significance of that, I don't think we even understand yet. But hey, I have no idea what's going on that beyond the reports.
We're still waiting for stories to come out emerging that one, but I guess we'll see. I think that's the only avenue where it doesn't happen, quite frankly. It's a lock. But that's why I've got myself a very dark horse. Maybe I'm being a little bit reactionary to the preseason. We've discussed before about how the preseason can mean everything but simultaneously nothing. But I'm buying the hype. I'm going to go with my dark horse rookie of the year as Tyler Hero from Miami Heat.
That is quite the prediction.
I know. I'm building into this hype. I'm buying in completely. He went pick number 13 to the Heat. His preseason so far has been fantastic. He's averaging 16 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 53% from 3 with a steal and 54% from the field. That's across 24 minutes a game. All right. And the case I can make for him obviously would be Zion going down injured. But what I really like about him is he's not just a catch and shoot guy. He's not just an elite catch and shoot, but he's proven, even just in the small sample size, albeit, that he can look for his 3-point shot. He can create separation with a dribble. He can curl off multiple screens. He's pulled up off of pick and rolls for a 3. I think he's got the whole shooting package. I think he's really aggressive. He showed that he's got some fire in the belly when he had a bit of a verbal altercation with Michael Carter-Williams. I could just see, if Zion were to go down, I could see a hype train carrying this guy into the conversation.
My only knock on this pick, and I absolutely love it, because I think it's everything that a dark horse candidate should be.
It's a very dark horse, to be fair.
Oh, it is. It's
I'm not saying he's the second best player on the board right here, but I like him.
My only issue is, and I'm asking purely out of curiosity, where do you see him fitting into the Butler regime, and also how many minutes is he actually going to get?
That's a difficult one, but I could definitely see him carving out a pretty significant role on this team. I think the Heat are going to be good. Obviously, Butler's the man in Miami, and Zion has the opportunity to be the man there, and some other Rookie of the Year candidates have the opportunity.
Oh, a few.
A few will have much more opportunity than Hero. But I could see the Miami Heat roster. I think that there's an avenue for a guy there who can play off ball, who's going to shoot at a really high efficiency, who's going to play defense, and who's going to bring it every single night. I think he's got that fire and aggression that someone like Jimmy Butler's going to like, and something like the Miami Heat system is going to appreciate and incorporate. And I could just see it happening.
Last question. How many minutes a game does he play?
Maybe, I think in around that sort of 25 to 30 in a good world.
Oh, goodness.
There are going to be some big minutes, though.
I think he gets lucky if he gets 20. But that's just because I think the Heat have huge question marks over that roster rotation. And also, he is a rookie. I would love for what you've just forecasted to manifest, though. I think that would be unbelievable.
It's a dark horse. It's what we do on this podcast.
Absolutely.
What have you got?
I thought it was very difficult, and I think that gives a whole nother level of credit to the media and how polarizing Zion has been. But after thinking it over, I think Ja Morant has a really compelling case if we are talking about dark horse candidacies.
Not very dark over there. Number 2 pick. Be bold.
But in the shadow...
Take the 13th pick in Miami.
In the shadow of Zion Williamson's monolithic shoulders, I think there's definitely a case for it. He's going to have all the usage in the world. His coach has already given him the green light and said, it's all right if he makes mistakes. I want him to play as fast as he wants. And he's going to take shots. The Grizzlies are no longer a team that is vying for a playoff spot. I think if you look at what they've let go, what they've traded in the last 2 years, i.e. losing Mark Gasol and Mike Conley, they know the time has come for a rebuild and the opportunity is there. And at the end of the day, this award for a rookie, if we look even at Luka Doncic, who did not make the playoffs last year, the award and the criteria from history is not predicated on any team success. It's about statistics. And I think Ja Morant is an excellent facilitator. He's going to have those assists. He's going to get his points.
Yeah, look, I like that pick. I think if Zion goes down, Ja Morant definitely has a good case because he's going to have the opportunity. I really like that he and Jaren Jackson Jr. could form this new sort of updated Memphis identity, post grit and grind. I think they're going to be a really good pick and roll, pick and pop duo. So yes, look, if I had to bet my hard-earned money on a rookie of the year who's not named Zion Williamson, I might be looking at Ja Morant, but I'm a sucker for hype. What can I say? So we've both gone Zion. We've got Dark Horse. I've got Dark Horse, Tyler Hero. You've gone Ja Morant. Next major award, we're going Defensive Player of the Year. And you know what? I'm going to kick us off on this one because I think it's Rudy Gobert, and I think
Please,
it is.
I agree.
I think it is another lock.
I think he has the best opportunity by far.
That's the thing. He'd be looking for his third straight Defensive Player of the Year, and I think the path for him attaining it on this third time might just be even clearer than it was before. His Utah was the league's second best defense in terms of defensive rating last year, behind only Milwaukee. And as we said, with Brogdon out and the addition of Conley, I think the Utah could be the favorite to go up to number one. His defensive advanced numbers are phenomenal. He led the league in defensive box plus minus 5.1, 5.5 defensive win shares, 100 offensive rating. All the advanced stats are there. Plus, you get the eye test of him blocking your favorite players into the third row on a nightly basis. I think with the Utah smaller lineup that they've got, where they're going to throw Bogdanovic and Ingles at the 3 and 4, I think it's just going to amplify Gobert's rim protection and paint presence even more. So I think this is a lock.
I agree. I don't even have. You've taken all the words out of my mouth. I'm just interested to hear your dark horse.
Dark horse, on this one, I'm actually going to go Kawhi, and it's much for a similar reason that you actually put him as your dark horse MVP, in that if he sort of defies the expectation of load management and he plays, 70, 75 games, intuitively, I think he is still the best defender in the NBA. And it's that's simple for why he's the dark horse. The reason why I don't have him above is I don't think his defensive numbers are quite as profound and eye-catching as Gobert. I think recent history suggests that big men tend to win this award. Plus, there's always the games question with Kawhi. But ultimately, I think he's still the best perimeter defender in the league. He could shut down your best player and be the best offensive player on the own end. And I think the Claw could go back-to-back. I think the Claw could get another one if he wanted it.
I agree. I think, again, the only thing stopping Kawhi is also everyone's kind of accepted where he is as a defender in terms of history. I think he has a case to be one of the best ever, and perhaps at the end of his career, we may even look back and say he is the best ever. Another problem, I think, is once Paul George comes back healthy, you have Patrick Beverley, a previous All-NBA first-team defender. You have, again, a healthy Paul George, Montrezl Harrell. The way that this team cohesively will be able to stop individual players and teams, maybe some of the Claw's cachet and his aesthetic is lost in that. But beyond that, as well as just health, I can't see any reason to discount a candidacy like that. If he plays, like I said, if he plays 70 games, he's going to be in line for the awards.
That's true in terms of how good defensively his teammates are, but just on the flip side of that, there might be a scenario where the Clippers are so good defensively by far and away that voters might feel compelled to reward that and give it to Kawhi. That's why I've just got him as my dark horse.
It's happened before. Happened before.
Have you got one?
I do indeed, and I rarely ever find myself advocating for this player, but I genuinely think Draymond Green could very well be holding that trophy at the end of the awards night.
Wouldn't be his first.
It definitely wouldn't. And I think if you look at the levels of his opportunity, and I know I keep harping on about this, but the Warriors are going to suck this year defensively. And I know it's not a pretty way of saying it, but think about what they've lost. Klay Thompson was intrinsic in propping up some of Steph Curry's defensive shortcomings. Kevin Durant, by the end of his tenure, was an elite defender. Andre Iguodala is no longer on the roster. If ever Draymond Green's defensive prowess was under the magnifying glass, it's now. And if he embraces that, the nature of his impact and what he can do on that side of the floor, I think could easily get him the award. If he can showcase it better than he ever has, and I think that he still has that in the tank, I wouldn't be surprised.
I could definitely see this one as well. I think the three names that we've mentioned, Gobert, Kawhi, and Draymond, are, at least in my opinion, the top three defenders in the NBA. So if you're in
ironically, the last winners of the award.
Very bold predictions in this category. But I definitely think when you're that good, when you're that good at defense as Draymond Green is, in the perimeter interior, he can guard anyone 1 through 5. I think there's definitely a chance for it to happen. I just think Golden State's defense is going to be so bad that it's going to be difficult to reward it with a DPOY.
You think it will? You think his own individual impact will suffer?
I think his individual impact could be incredible, but I don't think it's going to be enough to band-aid
the recognition
rest of the problems.
Will be lost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
And now that...
Alrighty, we're going to take a quick break there.
This is a call out for watch enthusiasts everywhere. The Quick20 Network is growing and we now have our very own watch hobbyist website. So head over and visit thenextwatch.com. That's THENXT watch.com. With a ton of reviews, features, and weekly columns on watches under 4 figures, thenextwatch.com has it all.
Alrighty, Lucas, on to our next award. We're going to one which has been dominated by one name for the last couple of years, just as Gobert has dominated the DPOY. And we're going to look at 6th Man of the Year. Who have you got?
I've got Terrence Ross.
Really? Giving the Magic fans out there some love. The first love that they've received in a while.
It's partly because of my own fatigue of just looking at Lou Williams as the favourite every year. But I think he actually makes a really compelling case. He's now entering his prime at 28, 29 years old. The opportunity is there. I mean, he's going to get, if you look at his past few seasons, at least 25 minutes a game, if not more. He has solid shooting splits, particularly if we look at his three-point percentage from last season at 38%. And the biggest part to this case is Orlando failed to attract any notable free agents.
Nothing
in
new
the
there.
offseason. Exactly. And I mean, I know it's not a revelation, but the fact is they're coming back with the same roster. They made the playoffs last season, and I think everyone in that organization would tell you at face value that the plan is to do better this season and to build off that. Ross was integral in last season's leap, and I think because of that, the opportunity is there. I think that he's only going to improve, as players tend to do if you follow his trajectory. I think he's gained more attention. The organization values him. He's played some big minutes. He's had some great scoring outputs. I think as a 6th Man of the Year candidate, particularly if Orlando can rise to that 6th or 5th seed, I think it could be his.
I'd love to see this happen. Low-key, Terrence Ross did have a 50-point game at one point, so I guess we should respect him. Lucas from deep with the Terrence Ross prediction. Apologies, I'm going to go a bit more boring with my 6th Man of the Year. I'm going with Lou Williams.
What happened to these claims of being bold?
I've used up my bold prediction on the Tyler Hero Dark Horse. I think I'm allowed to go boring on this one. I just think there's going to be opportunity again, as there always is for Lou. I think this award traditionally goes to someone who gets buckets off the bench. So I was flirting with the idea of a Sabonis if they were to bring him off the bench again this year, because I like his production per minute. I love what he does on the court. But I just think this kind of award needs eye-catching nights and performances. And I think Lou Williams scoring, especially, he's going to get particular opportunity with Paul George is out, as we know he will be the first 10-plus games. Kawhi's going to take nights off. And I think they're going to look at someone like Lou Williams, as they have for years on end, to get the ball in the hole. And I think he's just going to do it again, and I think the voters are just penciled him in already, to be honest.
I see that case, and I think it makes perfect sense. My only, I guess, counter to that would be they now have two offensive superstars, and I think, let's say, PG plays 60 games and Leonard plays 60 to 70. Those games, his impact will be reduced. I think on top of that, he doesn't necessarily bring another element to the game. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think almost all of his impact has always been just his capacity to give you a bucket when you need it. And now that the Clippers have that, like I said, I think his impact could suffer a little bit.
I think that's fair. I think he needs to have a little bit more credit for his playmaking. I mean, last season he did have the 20 points with 36% from three over a make a game, and I think that's what draws the eye, and fair enough. But he did have over 5 assists a game off the bench last season in 26 minutes. So obviously, while he is and should be known for his scoring, I think he was a critical playmaker for them last season, someone that they relied upon. I agree that his opportunity is going to go down this year, but I think it's disrespectful to predict anyone else.
Look, I see that logic.
Alrighty, you've locked in Terrence Ross. I've gone with Lou Williams. Apologies for being boring. Coach of the year. I'm going to start us off on this one. I'm going with Doc Rivers. I think if we're building on this Clippers thing that we've kind of gone on through here, it could be a big year for them, according to us. I think the Clippers have a great opportunity to be a really dominant team in the Western Conference. I think this is the kind of team which Doc Rivers loves and does best with. He's got a bunch of veterans, which he's known for not playing rookies. He loves veterans. That's harping back to his Celtics days. And I just think this Clippers team could have a real defensive veteran, grinded out team identity, which I think Doc Rivers really suits. I think he hasn't won the award in such a long time that he's almost due for another one with his tenure. And I could just see this Clippers wave riding through this year. And I think Doc Rivers could be rewarded for that.
I absolutely agree. I think he now has the opportunity, like he once did back in his Celtics days, to illustrate what he can do as a coach with a lot of talent. And as we both agree, the Clippers have boatloads. Some of their offensive sets are going to be a thing of beauty. And I think the intensity that he demands as a coach is obviously going to further their agenda, which in this case is a championship.
And there's just so much flexibility with this lineup as well that I love. I love that they can go big with someone like Zubac at center. I love that they can go a little bit smaller, a bit more gritty with Harrell off the bench. They've got shooters, they've got defenders, they've got scorers, they've got playmakers. And I just think Rivers has all the tools right here to steamroll through this conference and get himself a coach of the year.
Outside of the 2007-08 Celtics, do you think he's had a more talented roster?
I think you can make the case that this roster is even more talented, to be honest.
I don't know if we can do that until they win.
True, fair enough. Maybe that's something that we need to think about at the end of the season. But I just think on paper, he's got the best player in the world. He hasn't had that before. He's got a legit proven all-star next to him and someone who thrives in that second fiddle in Paul George. And he's just got depth and veterans everywhere. I think
it's a gorgeous opportunity.
Have you got a dark horse for this one? We're both going with Doc Rivers. We've agreed yet again. Wowzers. Who have you got, dark horse?
Luke Walton.
Really?
And I know this may surprise. I know, but think about how quickly he was snatched up. Is my counter to that every single time. He demonstrated sound, if not excellent, coaching abilities when he took over the Golden State Warriors back when Steve Kerr was sidelined himself. And I think he demonstrated competency then. I think with the Lakers, there was a lot more at play. And I think my greatest argument to this is the Sacramento Kings were one of the most exciting teams last season. They narrowly missed out on an 8th seed in the playoffs. And this year, if they make it, and if Luke Walton can build off some of the foundations they've already established and really raise De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley to the heights that they're predicted to reach, I think it could be his.
I like that. I think that's a nice little hipster niche pick you've got going on there. But to be frank, I'm just not picking up what Sacramento's putting down. I don't buy the hype of them vying for this playoff spot. And So I've looked elsewhere with my dark horse. I've gone with Eric Spoelstra. And I've low-key fallen in love with the Heat this offseason. I think they've got a really nice team, building, as I've mentioned before, with Tyler Hero.
It's the desperation of being a Spurs fan.
I know, I need to look elsewhere, even to our contemporary rivals. But anyway, I think recent history in the Coach of the Year award has been given to coaches who have had a team which has made a sort of surprising leap out of nowhere. If you look at Dwayne Casey, even Steve Kerr in 2015, Budenholzer with Atlanta, it's been these teams that have just sort of quietly crept up and exceeded expectations. And honestly, I think if Eric Spoelstra can keep Jimmy Butler in line for one season without imploding a locker room, he absolutely deserves it. So
yeah, that's a hero effort right there.
Big time. We've both gone with Doc Rivers. My dark horse is Spoelstra. Lucas's dark horse is Luke Walton. Scoring champion, Lucas. Who have you got?
This one is, as always, a very interesting prediction, but this year I'm going with Stephen Curry.
Really? Bold.
Yeah, it's more just if he's going to, I think, have a season reminiscent of his MVP campaign years in 2014 to 2016. Kerr, I think, is going to come up with some very, very crafty new sets for him to run around defenders and get it in the corner. I think he can create his own shot. He's probably, in terms of in his basketball intelligence and the way he sees the floor, at the peak of his career. And I think it will translate, particularly because, sure, D'Angelo Russell is a legitimate offensive threat, but I have some concerns in how he integrates into that system. And I think this is Steph's team, as it always has been. And really, the sky's the limit in terms of how many threes he's going to make with a usage rate similar to that of James Harden.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I spoke on the previous pod about how Steph Curry is going to have this huge offensive burden this year. But speaking of James Harden, I just can't go past him in predicting this award. Last season, he topped 36 points a game, and the next closest was Paul George at 28. And the clear knock, the elephant in the room in this one is that, but they've added Russell Westbrook this year. I think it can still be done. I think the gap is... I don't expect Harden's scoring to go up, of course, but I think the gap between him and second last year is just potentially insurmountable again this year. Westbrook last year averaged 23 points a game, and he took 20 shots. I know that's decent, but I think it can be accommodated into Harden's game and offensive production and burden without sacrificing his elite level scoring. I think the way that he can get to the line, shoot elite from three, get to the hoop, and the fact that I think he just loves getting buckets, as the title of this podcast would suggest. And I think 36 points last season, I think it's going to drop, but not drop enough for someone like Curry to get through. Alrighty, we're going to move on to our next award. This is one that we made up. We've gone a little left field on this one. We're calling this one the I Forgot You Existed award. And in terms of criteria, we're thinking about a player who might sort of somewhat out of nowhere have a sneaky good season from someone that we sort of least expected. Could be because they're an old guy and they're winding back the clock. Could be someone that we forgot on a new team, or just someone from completely left field. Lucas, who have you got for this one?
This one was a toil because I was really having fun with finding some of the veterans that haven't probably seen daylight in 3 or 4 seasons that still managed to wind up on the bench. Last season, my award would have been Raymond Felton, but sadly, he's no longer with the Thunder this season.
R.I.P.
However, going into this season, I've gone with Brandon Ingram.
Okay.
And it's purely because I think the way that Ingram is held now in the league isn't necessarily positive. I think that people still acknowledge the ceiling, but he's kind of disappeared from meaningful basketball, particularly if you look at how his last 2 seasons have wound down and also how the team has finished. And every year we build him up and it just doesn't translate. So I think in terms of adhering to your beautiful criteria...
Beautiful yet very vague, admittedly.
It's a little bit ambivalent, but adhering to it...
It's a fence sitter.
Exactly. Adhering to that, if we look at over his last final 15 games, he averaged 23 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3 assists, And in 36 minutes of action, he was also shooting a 56.5 field goal percentage, a 37.9 three-point percentage, and a respectable 75% from the free throw line. All of that considered, I expect Ingram in a new environment to thrive, particularly if he's healthy. Zion's going to be out for the first few weeks. We all know Lonzo Ball can't quite shoot the ball and hit the ball and score some points on a regular basis. I think all attention will be turned to Ingram to get them, a decent chunk of points every game. And I think he could very much have a very convincing season where he easily eclipsed 20 points per game and reminds people of what he was meant to be coming into the NBA. And what he can still be, actually. I won't count him out just yet. He's way too young.
That's almost a fundamental tenet of the criteria of this award. I like it, Lucas Pearce. I like this Ingram pick. I think the jury's definitely still out on this one, even though I think a lot of people have written him off or just forgotten about him. I think he kind of got lost in the whole Zion hype and that sort of Anthony Davis trade. Everyone's just thinking about Lakers with Davis, Pelicans with Zion, like sort of forgetting about these auxiliary pieces like Ingram, and I think he could have a really good year. But
he's 22 years old.
Still young. Still young. He could still be really good in this league.
That was the age when Michael Jordan came into the league. 22 years old. He so much time.
Lucas Pearce throwing the Michael Jordan comparison with Brandon Ingram.
It was purely on age. I'm not suggesting
be careful
that we're
with
going to
that
see.
one.
It's purely age.
Speaking of young guys, I've gone with another young guy for this award as well. And I've mentioned before that I'm a Spurs homer, so I can't get through a podcast without mentioning them. I've gone with DeJounte Murray, and I think a lot of people have sort of forgotten about him over this last year. He tore his ACL in last year's preseason, missed the entire year, but I think people forget that he's had 2 years in the league, and in his second year, he was kind of building a little bit of hype around him. People are starting to appreciate that this is one guy who could break out. A lot of people were calling him as a huge breakout candidate last year before his ACL, and I think it equally applies to this one. He's 6'5", he's got a 6'9.5" wingspan. He's a really fluid and silky athlete who can explode to the rim. He's a great finisher in the lane. He's got a good floater. And he's an improved playmaker on per 36 numbers at least, because his opportunity wasn't great in his first 2 years. But where I get really excited about Murray is on the defensive end. He's the youngest player to ever get selected an NBA All-Defensive team. He was in the second team in 2018. And that was despite the fact he played only 21 minutes a game. I think this year he's going to get a huge opportunity. I think he's going to be our starting point guard. I think he's going to be a great defender. I think the only obstacles he really has to overcome is his health. Hopefully he can prove that ACL was an aberration, and his shooting isn't great. He's a 26% three-point shooter on less than one a game. But that being said, we at San Antonio haven't really woken up to the whole three-point thing again, despite getting a championship out of it. We've kind of forgotten it. So I think he's going to fit in just fine.
I have no issues with your pick, particularly because there's not much else that's going to shine brightly in San Antonio.
Harsh. Okay, I'm going to move on before I get into a 45-minute spiel about that one. But our next award, we've dedicated this one. We've given it a shout-out. And it's now henceforth known as the Corey Brewer Award for most random player to drop 50 points. There's not a lot of science in this one. It's pretty self-explanatory. Who have you got?
So I know this pick may surprise some people, but in terms of the infamous Corey Brewer Award for most random player to drop 50 points, I'm going to go with Terry Rozier. And my basic reasoning is that no one is going to care once the garbage minutes start 3 minutes into the fourth quarter.
3 minutes into the second quarter, I reckon.
I felt like the way I handled it, I had to be nice. But yes, you're not wrong.
It was a diplomatic answer. This Hornets team is going to be
They're going to lose
terrible.
games at the jump.
Yes. When the starting fives are announced, the betting markets will be taking them off the table.
But if someone wants me to actually break this down, I will. Last season, Kemba Walker took 20.5 shots. Now, I'm going to read out some names, and I want you to tell me who's going to cover that impact, okay?
This will be good. All right, let's do it.
Dwayne Bacon. Nicholas Batum,
Washed.
and still receiving over 25 million a year. Bismack Biyombo,
Washed.
Miles Bridges.
I don't mind him.
He's a year younger than me.
He's not taking those shots, no.
Joe Cheeley.
Who?
Exactly. I can go down. I could talk about the Willie Hernan Gomez's of the roster. I could talk about Jeremy Lamb. I can talk about Malik Monk. I can talk about the fact that Tony Parker recently left and that Cody Zeller is still a contributor on this team. But my point is, Rozier has the most fire. He has tasted the most responsibility. And I think he's going to enjoy the fact that he's also probably their best player. So you can't tell me that there's not going to be a night where the dude chucks 30 shots and he hits maybe 18 of them.
Look, it would be the only mild flickering light of beacon hope.
Just quickly,
otherwise,
let me be clear.
Situation.
Just quickly, let me be clear. I don't think that they're going to win the game that he scores 50. But
Devin Booker-esque.
But when you factor in everything I've just spoken about, I think it's more than plausible.
It's scary that could happen. But Scary Terry for 50, I'd love to see it. With my Corey Brewer award for most random player to drop 50, I'm going with Spencer Dinwiddie at the Nets. And he's kind of the other side of the coin to Terry in that he's a good player, but also he has far less opportunity in the Nets. He's going to be coming off the bench. Kyrie Irving's on the team. Kyrie Irving's going to take a lot of shots and he's going to want to be the one scoring 50 every night. But my argument for this one, I'm imagining a scenario where Kyrie Irving is injured. I know that's a huge leap. It might never happen.
Far out.
And
that is morbid. You just
and
gutted Scary Terry. And now you're saying...
If he's Scary Terry, if you're listening to this, I apologize. But I think Dinwiddie's this kind of random heat check guy that's just going to go off. He's a decent three-point shooter, 33%, 2 makes a game. He averages about 16 points off the bench, which I think is really impressive. And he's just thrown into a lineup one night where he gets so much more minutes and opportunity if there's like a Kyrie Irving injury. He's shown that he can get buckets. He got a career high 39 points last year. Couple more threes and he's there, and I think it would be a Corey Brewer-esque random 50 points. We're going to take a break there and throw it to our fun fact guy.
Today's fun fact centers on NBA salaries. It's no secret that NBA players since the 1976 merger have always been paid well. However, the abundance of wealth players are privy to today blows the lifestyles of some players in past decades out of the water. Look at Michael Jordan's salary of $550,000 as the third-picked rookie of 1984. Adjusted for inflation, that salary translates to just over $1.3 million. While that's quite the sumptuous paycheck, it does not compare to last year's third pick and reigning rookie of the year, Luka Doncic. The Dallas Mavericks guard earned over $6.5 million in his rookie year, and in his sophomore season will enjoy a $1 million pay increase. With multi-billion-dollar television deals and global streaming services, NBA salaries are set to continue increasing. Back to you, boys.
Alrighty, Lucas, moving away from our predictions component of this podcast, we're going to look at a little something I wrote for the BetweenBuckets.com website. Go check that out. It's a shameless plug again. And the question I've been asking myself is, can a big man still be the best player on a championship team? And it's something I find really interesting because obviously I'm the biggest Tim Duncan fan in the world and I've seen him do it multiple times. And I'm wondering if that sort of mold can be replicated, but also because I think with the way the NBA has shifted, we all know about the three-point revolution, the pace and space nature of the contemporary NBA. I think the role and nature of the current prototypical NBA big man is kind of in flux, because I think some teams are looking for stretch bigs who are basically just rebounders and shooters from the three-point line. Other teams are looking at guys in that sort of Clint Capella mold that they're going to set screens, they're going to rebound, they're going to protect the rim. But there's not that many. I think the trend has sort of been away having a big man as the fundamental pillar of a team's offense and a best player on, and we haven't seen it be as successful in terms of championship winning with a big man as your best player. So I thought I'd look at 5 big man names that I think have the talent to be able to be the best player on a championship team. And I've looked at Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jokic, Embiid, and Davis. And my broad strokes argument is that context is really important in this. I think they've all got incredible talent, but for me, I ultimately ended up going with Anthony Davis as the most likely to be a best player on a championship team. Just quickly though, those 5 names, Lucas, how do you see any of their particular chances in being a best player on a championship team, and more of like the role of the NBA big these days?
I think what's fascinating to your argument is that all 5 of those players have legitimate talent to be in, the top 5 players in the game. Some of them even possess the ability to be the best player in the game. And the fact that there are 5 big men that have both integrated aspects of the golden age era of a big man, cutting to the basket, dunking the ball, bruising, posting up. The fact that they still have those foundations, but they have achieved an incredible level of modernization in how they score the ball. I think your argument rests on comfy shoulders just on that. The talent is there, and I think when you look at those 5 names, every single one of them possesses the capacity to hold up that finals MVP trophy.
And that's kind of the interesting component of this debate, I think, at the moment, is where I think the nature of the NBA has sort of shifted away from the big man, but now we're getting this resurgence of talent in guys like those 5 that are pressing the argument that the big man can still dominate on a nightly basis. There's 5 candidates with extreme high-end talent. They're all a little bit different, and some a bit more offensively inclined, like a Towns. Obviously, Gobert is more of a defensively inclined player, but I think all of them uniquely dominate a game that's somewhat contradictory to where the current NBA is at.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think what's interesting is that there's, of those teams that you've mentioned and you've talked about, there's at least 3 to 4 of them that at least have an argument to be in the finals, if not this year, but over the next 5. And even Karl Anthony Towns is probably not going to get there anytime soon, he's very,
as the article points out, spoiler alert,
he's very, very young, and he could serve as really the figurehead of any successful team, I think, if he was surrounded by the right people. So in terms of who I think is probably going to have the chance to do it first, I would probably actually counter your belief that it's Davis and say Gobert. If we're looking at this season, I think the Utah Jazz have the more impressive squad, and I think Gobert, if they were to win the finals, would be the sole instigator of that success. If not, instigator might be too strong a word, but he would at least be the highest contributor. What he does for that team in terms of their defense is phenomenal, and I think that perhaps the romanticist in me is getting carried away, because it would be great for those defensive-minded bigs, and by extension those defensive-minded players, to get a win and to prove that, hey, our contribution still can escalate and see us win championships.
Yeah, I think Gobert's a really interesting case study for this kind of question, because I don't think he's your sort of traditional best player on a championship team mold. And that's not a very controversial statement. But the fascinating part of Gobert, I think, is that he is actually this sort of stereotypical mold of the contemporary big, like Clint Capella, Tristan Thompson, is like set screens, roll to the rim, play defense, especially protect the rim. What separates Gobert from people like them is just how elite he is at it, and how he can shape Utah's fortunes. The knock that I have on him, though, in terms of his ability to best play on a championship team, is that I think if Utah were to make the leap from what they are right now, which is a really good team and sort of, second round conference finals kind of threat, if they were to make that jump to a championship team, I think they would need to swing a little bit more in the sense of Donovan Mitchell as being their best player, just because I think my problem with Gobert is that crunch time, 5 minutes to go in a huge playoff game, he's not someone that you're going to throw the ball to on the low block and ask to make a play. It's going to be someone like Mitchell that's going to be asked to go get the baskets. And I think if we're looking at finals MVP and quote-unquote best player, which are different things, I think if Utah to make that leap, it's going to come from someone like Donovan Mitchell making a Dwayne Wade-esque leap and becoming an all-star level elite talent. That's why I think Gobert might be a little hindered.
And look, I don't necessarily disagree. I think it's more complex than that in terms of what it would take for them to win the finals, obviously. Yeah. Without spoiling your article, I think it's a great piece, and I think that it really opens up this conversation about almost the resurgence of what big men are and what they can do.
Summed it up better than I could, Lucas. I'll take that glowing recommendation. And on that note, on the note of, glowing up my own writing ability, I think we'll end the podcast. It's been a pleasure, Lucas.
As always, my friend.
Catch you next time.